start now. Hi, good evening, everyone.
Opo.
Thank you so much for being here and for participating. And thank you for our guest speakers who are here and for the audience who are watching right now.
Thank
And
you all.
today is a special day because it's the first webinar for Alab Assembly and MedCan Party. And our causes is to call for the legalization of medical cannabis in the Philippines. And right now we do have Nina Parks, and Nina Parks is the one below me, and she's wearing hi. Say hi, Nina. Yeah, she's wearing green, and Nina Parks is actually the creator of cannabis equity brand Gift of Doja, which she'll discuss later on. She's also the racial equity lead of the San Francisco Cannabis Oversight Committee and the co-founder of the Equity Trade Certification Program here in San Francisco. And we also have Pia Barton. So say hi, Pia.
Hi.
And she's the founder and CEO of Malaya Botanical CBD Company. And she's also the former board of directors for the Small Farmers Association in Mendocino, California. So she did dealt with cannabis farmers as well there. And we do have our co-host Kuya Ed, who's also going to introduce the other guest speakers.
Hello po. Hello everybody and good evening. Right below me is Kuya Ernest Lavaro. He's a licensed manufacturer and distributor for cannabis, THC, and oils. Is that correct, Kuya Ernest? You say hello
That's
for me real quick.
Hi.
Yeah.
Hello.
And then to my other side, on this side, is Ate Ara Chaudhary. Did I say that correct, Ate? Ate Ara? Ate Ara, can you hear me?
It's Chowdhury.
Chowdhury.
Okay.
Chowdhury?
And she's
Can you hear? Can I?
Sure. Yes.
Chowdhury.
Chaudhary.
Yeah.
Yes, and Ate Ara is a filmmaker and the producer of Super Psycho Cebu.
Yes.
If you guys haven't seen it, you guys ought to watch it. Where is it playing right now, Ate?
I think
It's
they
on
have it in
demand on
Vimeo.
Vimeo, so they just need to search Super Psycho Cebu.
There you go.
Mhm.
And she's also you are a well-known political asylum applicant from the Philippines due to that specific film that they didn't like very much today.
I think it's kind of delayed
It
on
was
her
also
side.
because it might have been also because I'm a human rights advocate. I'm connected with Aquila. We're a human rights centered artist collective based in the Philippines, and we'd been doing screenings of advocacy films. In 2018, we were red tagged for doing these screenings. Parlade, if you guys remember the Red October plot, um, they were talking about how our screenings were an excuse to recruit for NPA, and we're not.
Oh, wow.
Um,
Yeah.
but you know how easy it is to
That's
red
a pretty
tag
big
these
allegation.
days. So
It's crazy.
yeah, our political asylum application is because of the anti-terror bill. So when the anti-terror bill was passed, we were already here. We were on vacation. We just happened to be here, and then our flights got canceled because of COVID, and our friends, our colleagues in the Philippines told us it might not be a good idea to come back at this time because of the
Mhm.
anti-terror bill. So here we are.
Well,
And
thank you.
here we are. Yeah. We're trying to awaken the Philippines also because, like what Ara just shared, she experienced that discrimination because they made the cannabis film. When we here in
Mhm.
California, we see a lot of people being helped by cannabis medically,
Yeah.
culturally, economically too. So, yeah, Kuya, do you want to transition the floor to our guest speakers?
Sure. Ate Ara, um, as far as your transitioning into like coming over here and then being like with the medical
Mhm.
cannabis or just being around medical cannabis to begin with, how was it like? You know, you came from the Philippines and you saw
Yeah.
both sides of all of this. What was your thoughts on that?
Well, we we we'd been we made the film. We made Super Psycho Cebu before Duterte's time. It was actually written during Erap's time. Christian Linaban, who directed it, wrote it when he was in college, and we when I read it, it wasn't about, like, he had written it as if it wasn't about weed. But reading it, understanding what college culture is like in the Philippines, where
Yeah.
people smoke on the sly, they hide, they have spots. When they look for weed, it's like a quest. It's an unending quest to look for good stuff. And there's a lot of reasons, no, for it being a little bit more lax,
Right.
because what harm does it do? Even before Duterte, if you got caught for weed, they would, they'd make you recite a poem or sing nursery rhymes and then let you go. Like, they'd let you go with barely a slap on the wrist. But
Right.
when we released the film, we released it the year that Duterte became president, and we didn't expect it. It was a while it was what's it called while it is political satire, it was a satire um to the indignity that we experience in the Philippines, to the corruption in general, to how, like, politicians don't give a flying fuck about their constituents. And um it was horrifying, the kind of harassment that we experienced during the time that we tried to promote this film, because we'd screen it, like, we couldn't hope to get an empty RCD for the film, so we'd screen it in small venues. We'd go around in basketball courts with
Right.
film
Right. Just to be
festivals.
able to spread it.
And
Spread it, right?
yeah, at the film festival in Gensan, in General Santos City, where Manny Pacquiao is from,
Mm.
a kid asked Christian, "How did Pidea allow you to screen this film?" So already, and it's just a comedy. It's just a stoner comedy. It's not even, it's not even like there's. It's supposed to be a movie. Even if you make a movie about a murder, it doesn't mean that you're promoting murder or anything. And
Right.
and already, just by talking about cannabis, just about talking about cannabis in a positive light, we were getting a lot of trouble for it. At one of our screenings, there were even policemen who showed up, undercover policemen. It was April 20 at a venue na Christian's aunt owns. And Christian's aunt, by the way, si Bambi Beltran, was caught. What's the term, Chris? She was incarcerated without a warrant for a joke she made on Facebook. That's how
Wow.
dangerous freedom
Wow.
of speech is.
Crazy that this
The
Wow.
situation
Like
is,
just a joke, huh?
yeah, just a joke. So, like, if your story doesn't go in line with the administration, if it does not align with what the administration wants to present, now weed is bad, weed is
They look at you
dangerous
different.
and stuff, you could really get in trouble. And like, we have a lot of fear about going home and coming here. It's it's such a culture shock, because um Christian was like, we were in Oakland, and where did we go, Chris? Now we went somewhere, and then his cousin gave him pot, and he was trying to hide, and then his cousin was like, "Dude, it's okay. We're in San Francisco. We don't have to worry about that." Like,
It's different
it's such a culture, yeah, it's such a culture shock for us
Absolutely.
to be, to be offered weed for nothing. Like, here, take this. And they're
Exactly. And
so
that
yeah.
kind of leads me to my next question is, now that you've seen this side where it's legal,
Yeah.
how do you see how this is helping us here, and how do you think that this could help, us in general, just the
Yeah.
Filipinos? I mean, pretty wild.
There's so much that it can do to help the Filipinos. First, obviously, medically, like, our family here, Christian's family, who used to, they didn't condone it because it was illegal. But coming here, they have joint pains, they have issues, and you give them cream, and they have such gratitude for it. And um and this is something that we want for the old folks back home. For my mom, I want my family to be able to experience like the relief that they can get from this medicine. And then economically speaking, we're an agricultural country. We have so much agricultural land, and we need cash crops like this. And but that's just the tip of the iceberg, as I'm sure the rest of the guest speakers can talk about.
Yes,
Hello.
I'm sorry. Hi. Which kind of Nina Parks. I'm sorry. I completely. You should have been like the one in this, but you're the creator of a brand, a cannabis brand at that. How do you see this kind of helping out with Filipinos here? What do you? I mean, there's a big difference as far as what's being done in the Philippines with cannabis and what we're doing here, what we're allowed to do here.
Yeah, from the land of
Right.
where it's illegal to the land of the legal. Yeah.
Right. So I'm listening to you guys, everybody's stories, and I want to acknowledge how brave and courageous you guys are for continuing the conversation um, in the face of a lot of persecution and adversity, especially with Duterte's perspective, on the war on drugs, and also from him and his opinion flip-flopping so much on, like, first being like medical cannabis is okay, right? And then going into a place where he's like, I know the argument is going to be that everything is medicinal, but while I'm here, this is not going to happen, right? So it is
A big flip flop. It's
It's
a
a
big
big-
flip flop.
And then speaking of flip flops, right, is that there was just this big art installation, right, of over 30,000, like representing over 30,000 people killed by Duterte's drug war, right? So I want to acknowledge that where I'm coming from, in the conversation and where I'm able to navigate through, it's not in the face of that much political violence. We have our own here in America, because we're seeing today how one young man in Oklahoma was, they found that he was a black man. They found that he was not guilty of murder, but they still they took him off death row, but sentenced him to life imprisonment. And where Kyle Rittenhouse, right? So you had Julius, and then you have Kyle, and Kyle got off and he shot people on video, right? So like America has its own version, right, of what's happening in the Philippines. And so I want to acknowledge that is the power context that we're having these conversations in, right? So for me, in entering into the space, even to think about having a brand, it was because my brother, my kuya, Malcolm Mirage, who has a company also called Mirage Medicinal, had a vision. He saw what was coming in California, because we had medical laws for 20 years functioning under a proposition called 215, right? So it was medical laws where it was under collectives. So collectives or cooperatives. Cooperatives were something that was you could file for that paperwork, whereas collectives are a loose network of people that all have their own structure, right? So, but under those two definitions, people were allowed to grow, to be able to collect patients that had scripts from doctors, and were able to distribute cannabis within their closed network, right? And then we saw legalization happen. My brother had a vision. He had a brand. He knew brands were going to be what the purchasing public understands, because that's how our economic system works. You have brand recognition. You guys know things like Supreme and Gucci and all these things, right? They hold a pretty, like, a definition of quality and of status and all of these other things. So like having a brand in cannabis, because of the landscape in which people purchase, is the best way to communicate to our consumers, right? Because people understand brands as a symbol, as something that represents them, right? And that they want to purchase for because because they know that it's the best price or it's the best quality or it's whatever it is, right? So I've created a brand called Gift of Doja, and my brand is a specifically one that works with small boutique farmers that grow in soil, right? And then grow in sun and also mix like greenhouse, but also soil grown. So the reason for that is one, these farmers produce a smaller carbon footprint. So I know with the Philippines having a lot of fertile soil and agricultural land, and the people having a lot of know-how of how to grow from the earth, right? That being able to protect the vibrancy and the quality of the soil in the Philippines, because it is a set of islands, and like it's not a finite resource, right? So not being not growing in things that produce a lot of waste, because then where does the waste go? How does the management of that happen, right? These are things that we have to think about here in California too, because it is, we are a green state, meaning that we invest in alternative energies, and then also we have a huge agricultural economy, right? So there's a need to understand what is the carbon footprint. So that's what, for my brand, it's very important, because I also feel that the sun, as well as the soil, helps to produce the best qualities of a plant, right? So versus lights and all these electronic things that, although are very efficient and people can maximize their profits, it is not the most sustainable.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. Now, how do you think this changes the Filipino culture, as far as what we're seeing develop now, especially now, because I still think marijuana is still pretty new to the public in general. It's been around for a while, but as far as being open, and cultural changes goes through generations. What do you see happening?
I would be curious, Pia, what do you think? How do you see the shift? Because I'm American born, so my
That's true.
mother's, and I grew up with, so I don't want to pretend, I have the perspective that other people have, so even, I am a descendant of the Filipino family members, but culturally I grew up in San Francisco, so I would need to understand your guys' perspective.
So coming from, I came here when I was 11, and growing up, being a deacon's daughter, going to Catholic school my whole life,
Hmm.
drugs in general, specifically, weed, it's always been, it's a stigma that it's bad, it can kill, and it's something you don't do. So even when I got into the cannabis industry 7 years ago as a marketing consultant and did not medicate at the beginning, it was business, it was work for me, until I dove more into it, learned more about the industry. And so it just changes everything. And so now I actually, my business from the very beginning, I went from, me directly to consumers. I didn't have any retail. So this year alone, my team and I probably have done about 300 events, outdoor events,
Wow, just this year.
just this year. So we have
Wow. It's a weekend, every weekend.
6. Yeah, we have 6 this weekend. Tomorrow 4.
Yeah.
Wow, congratulations.
So I feel like and this is our 3rd year. And so from the very beginning, before hemp bill was even passed, I was able to I've dealt with the consumers directly. I have seen, the evolution of cannabis from, at the beginning, where I just talked and educated and nobody bought. People have, put me down, have said, what am I doing? committing sin and all that. And how it is now where I have people come to the shop, email me saying how much I've helped them. I've gotten people off opiates, like,
Wow.
yeah. So I mean, it's very rewarding, and there's times when it's been so tough. Fighting for 7 years, it's a lot, even for somebody who's a fighter like me. Um, and so there's days when I question, what I'm doing in the future. But then I get these emails or phone calls, and it's a good reminder that I am where I'm supposed
You're
to be.
you're on the right track and you're doing great. Thank you,
Mhm.
Atapia.
Thank you.
Kuya Ernest,
Can
what's
I
up?
Hey,
just say
Yes,
300 events in the Philippines is insane.
that's insane. 300
Yeah,
events.
let's do 300 cannabis events in the
Insane.
Wow.
Philippines. Yeah,
Wow.
when
before
it's
Imagine
legal
20.
that.
there.
Hey,
And
And
then,
that's one business,
huh?
right? That's just you. That's your business. That's one business out of how many hundreds of thousands here in California. You're doing how many events per year or just this year? That's
there are a
amazing.
lot of cannabis events. Actually, just last November 11, Nina Parks had her event, right, Nina? Like,
So,
you had an equity event for cannabis also.
Yeah, so that event specifically, I'm not going to take too much time because I
Yeah.
know we have another speaker, but that
Okay.
that event
Alright.
was to be able to bring together farmers in Northern California with brands and equity brands in in the Bay Area, so that people can meet each other, because the farmers are always up on the hill, and then the folks that are like on the ground over here are always in the shops and all these other things. So it's hard for them to connect. So we have to encourage social situations and safe places.
Yes.
Also outdoor events. That's the safe way right now. So.
great job,
That's good.
Atenina.
Yeah, thank you.
Kuya Ernest,
Yes.
how are you?
Good.
How are
Good.
you?
Good.
You're so calm. You're just
Yes,
chilling
You
with
know,
Kuya
us.
I'm
Ernest.
chilling right here.
God.
Sober
I'll,
now.
it's. I know. Actually, it's past my bedtime. That's what it is.
Well, thank you for joining us.
Thank
This
Oh,
is
you.
absolutely,
Very much.
this is
absolutely.
our call. This is our chance as
I
international
understand.
advocates to do what we can for the Philippines. We're not even there,
Absolutely.
but we want
Yeah.
to help. That's the passion that burns inside of us. Is that we
Absolutely.
understand how much this can help us, not just medicinally, on the hemp side, industrial side, right? There's a lot of things that we can do. Now, you're a licensed cannabis manufacturer and distributor here in California. Is that correct?
That's correct.
How do you do that? Like, where do you just
Wow.
say, hey, you know what? I think I want to
I
manufacture and distribute.
it's. I'll be honest with you. It's one of those things that you just have to believe that you can, right? Um, I'm for a lack of a better word, I know I'm very unique.
There you go. There you go.
It's something that because I think at the end of the day, it's just my passion for it, right? I gave up a career. I almost gave up a family. I gave up a lot, right? But for some reason, I know I'm right, and I have to fight for this. For the first time in my life, that there's almost like a goal, like a path
Yeah,
that's so clear, but
just
it's
went
so
in.
hard to explain.
Atipia was
Yeah.
mentioning earlier, I was like, what if I wanted to become like a superstar or an astronaut? And she goes, just do it. The time will come. You'll just know when the time is right.
Absolutely, you just have to dive in, right?
Yeah.
We are
It's supposed to be effortless, and if it's not, it's a universe way of saying it's not the right.
absolutely,
Or-
and like all I can say is I know I gave up a lot, but I know I also learned a lot because I've also failed a lot, and yet I moved forward. And it's very rewarding. Yeah, I if I don't have to have a Monday, I don't have to have a Monday. If I don't have to have a Sunday, I don't. There is no such thing as time frame for me. Now I have control of my time. I can almost demand what Tuesday will be for me. I've always told people, my ultimate goal is just one day, and I'm not there yet. Yeah, that's just to ask my wife, to wake up on a Tuesday morning and ask her, where do you want to have coffee? Right? Isn't that the ultimate goal of everybody? It's that's to me is success. And I can clearly say that I'm on that path because I know what I'm doing is right. Um, is it helping me? Yeah, financially, I took a big financial loss, but I can only imagine that if I made that, I can make it again.
Right.
And because of my passion and my goal, it's I've always told myself that you're unstoppable,
There you
right?
go.
That whatever, because for the first 40 years I'm 50 years old. I'm a lolo. I'm a grandpa, right?
Nice.
And yeah, right. That's why it's past my bedtime. It's 9:30 in California.
Nice.
And but the first 40 years of my life, I was against this plant. I was
You were
against
against
this plant.
marijuana. You were against marijuana.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness.
You
If
haven't tried it back then. That's why you
no,
were
no,
against.
hell no.
No, not
It's
even.
almost an insult for me if someone actually sparks a joint in front of me,
Uh,
right? So
Wow.
that's how extreme I was. I followed my mama.
was right. Was
I'm a,
right. Are you? Are
and
you? Are you? I'm gonna light this joint.
I mean, hey, you know what? Go spark it up.
There you
All
go.
right.
But like I said, the first that I saw both
I'll spark one
perspectives.
for you.
The first 40 years of my life, I was so against it, and all of a sudden, it took a medical doctor to suggest it to me, and
Wow.
absolutely right. It was like, are you kidding me, doc? It's almost that kind of situation. And it took me several months to actually see a recommended medical marijuana doctor, right, to get a card. This is probably back in 2010. And when I first got that, before I even stepped in a dispensary, it took me another 2 months,
Wow.
and it took
You
me
were
another
really
three
taking your
weeks.
time, huh?
I would say my guilt is like head over heels. It's not. You got to remember, I was the child of the 80s. I saw Nancy Reagan telling me that my brains would be fried eggs if I actually spark a joint, and I believe that. You got to remember the power of suggestion is there. You repeat that enough, it's the subliminal message will kick in, and it stuck with me.
Especially from people who are respected. People that public figures. And for them to say something like that was
Exactly, but and then, like I said, back in the 80s, it's just what it is. It's just it's almost like, okay, you're good to drink, but just don't take weed.
I think it's part of the
And
commercials too, the reefer
abs- abs-
madness that they promoted.
absolutely,
Yeah.
the reefer
you know,
madness.
and and
Right.
and that, and like I said, it worked for me. It worked for me until I had insomnia for such a long time that I couldn't bear it anymore, and I was willing to try everything, and even though, because my cognitive thinking is so still like there, where I can't decipher that what I'm doing is so wrong, and yet I got to have a solution to my problem, right? And one day I just tried it, slept well, and I said, you know what, there might be something to this. Right, but I was still skeptical, and then it took, and it kind of funny, where I went to my aunt's birthday party, and on the corner of the table there was some, I don't know, some cookies, or I thought some kind of brownies on the side. That's really on the far side. So I was like, oh, you know what? This is kind of cleanse my palate before I eat the kare kare or anything like that, right? So I popped one in, and right away, because back then, they haven't mastered
The
how
dosage.
to actually cook, and not only, but to actually cook it properly. So for the first time you actually take it, almost instantaneously you'll like, holy crap, this is like a waste, you know.
It was still
And and I was like, you know what? It's already halfway there. It's kind of too late. My doctor. I do have a recommendation card. hell, I'm not really doing anything bad.
Let's
As
do
long
it.
and they're
Let's
not
do it.
and they're not gonna smell me. It's like, okay,
Right.
at that evening I had the time of my life. And absolutely,
And that was your first time with an edible.
that I was the first time on my edible, and I couldn't believe it. How great everybody was.
Wow.
My brother. Every time he looked at me, I just for some reason, I just laughed, and I keep telling him, please stop doing that because I'm my tummy's already hurting at this point.
Stop.
And this is the biggest thing is that evening I actually, when the first time, and I know, there's no malice or anything like that. So I slept. I woke up around probably, I don't know, probably about 4 hours of sleeping, right? And I had, like I'm saying, I was 40 years old. So, an old man have to go to the bathroom, got to pee. For the first time in my life, for some reason, I felt like I was 18 again. It like free flowed like the snow tomorrow. I was like, wow. I was like, holy crap. It's like, I felt like I was here for 20 minutes. I was so relaxed and it was so different.
Real, yeah.
And don't get me wrong, I was moonwalking going back and I was like, wow, this is like a different trip. But
Amazing.
it was amazing at the same time, kind of scary where, okay, now I understand why people are scared of this, right? Because you don't have control. You don't know how to control it yet.
Your first new tweet.
Right? So, absolutely. So, but the fact is, after I actually lay down 4 hours, usually I will not sleep again. I slept for another 6 hours. I actually
Slept like a baby.
Absolutely. And you know what? I woke up like a champ. Right? So at that point, I knew that there's something to this. Right. And I gave it a chance. I went from once a month to twice a month to 3 times a month to like twice a week, 3 times a week. And finally I said, what am I guilty about? It's actually making me feel better. Right. And
you out every day.
It helped me a lot, big time. And I also found
It's
out
really
that
social conditioning, no?
absolutely. And now all of a sudden I'm finding out that I was becoming a better manager at work. I was a better father. I was a better husband. And I was like, wow. I all of a sudden I developed a lot of empathy. Right? I was like, wow, this is such a weird feeling, but it's such a great feeling.
You feel a lot lighter, don't you?
Absolutely. And I just did some research and I told myself that, hey, you know what? If a guy like me, a middle-aged guy like me, who's as regular as you can get, have this if this one can make me feel better, I probably have 5 million of myself, right, in this world. And that's where it started. I started watching, YouTube videos. Like I said, I started filtering the ones that are true, the ones that are not true, and I started mixing and infusing things out of that, and that's where my passion started. A few years ago, I quit after 15 years in a corporate job. I quit. All of a sudden, I just felt like I have to quit because I know for some reason in my heart that
calling.
I know that I have a calling. And I know this is it, and the biggest things I know that's why it's my calling is because I know my family was going to go against me, and yet I know that it was so right. It felt so right that I have to fight for it. I've never in my life that feel that I have this fight in me, and all of a sudden I had it. All of a sudden I have a spark that I never had. That I can tell people that, hey, you know what? If I'm going to go ahead and pass away today, I can clearly tell you that I actually tried pursuing my goal.
You were awakened. You were awakened, and you understood.
Absolutely, and it's because of cannabis. At the end of the day, it made me a better person. It made me. I have a family of doctors. Right. But Now I know. I don't have to study like they did for years and years and years and be an expert in something, because now I know how to heal somebody. A regular person like me
Yeah.
can actually extract the plant, right? A
Yeah, you
regular
can
person
really
like
help
me can
someone.
actually, absolutely. Why? Because I've seen it over and over again. I am a regular person, but I
Mm.
know how my cousins and my uncle feel, right? When they can actually treat somebody, right? And
Mhm.
now I understand that the healing process, because it heals. It really does. It healed me spiritually, and then all of a sudden
Mhm.
it gave me a boost of confidence, like there's no tomorrow,
Mhm.
and it's more to the point, because I know that for the first time in my life I'm a trailblazer. You
You're
know how many?
Malaya.
Mhm.
Malaya.
Absolutely,
Malaya
You
and
ka na.
end up.
It's free.
Mhm. Yeah,
the
Malaya
plant,
ka na.
yeah,
Malaya ka na.
the plant set me free.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
Malayang malaya.
Yeah.
Oh, and I remember
It's there's
earlier. Yes, because I
there was
remember lang
something na there
earlier.
was something that
Sige, go
came
ahead,
out.
Ara.
I sorry. Do
Yeah.
you remember, Julie, when we were talking to Rocky about how it's the reason that cannabis became a what's it category 1 drug
Schedule
was
one.
out of racism. Schedule 1, yeah,
Yes, yes.
schedule 1 drug was because of racism
That's
against
the start.
Mexican
Yes.
farmers. and
Yes,
then
in the
and then
back.
she was like brown farmers, and it clicked in my head na holy crap, it's not just Mexican farmers, it's also Filipino
Filipino
farmers na
farmers, even
this
way
is
back. Yes.
really, yeah, na, that blew my mind because it's back home, like what Ernest is saying, like before I became involved in the arts, I was in the news, I was a student, I was a college student, and it I didn't there's also such a big stigma about around weed. There's very little information. People don't know the difference between weed and meth. Like it's all lumped
They
together
feel
na
like it's
basta
the same
drugs.
effect na, oo. And
Yeah,
it's gonna make you
if
violent.
you take drugs, it's gonna make you violent and it's gonna make you kill people. Like
They
people
all have
don't
the
know
same
that the
effect, right?
worst thing that can happen. No, yeah, the worst thing that can happen to you stoned is you'll fall asleep. And it's not even you'll fall asleep because you'll faint. You'll fall asleep because I'm really,
So
really
relax.
relaxed now, which is what you need for
Yes.
a lot of no, diba? For a lot of different
Reasons.
diseases.
Yeah.
So it really blew my mind when like when I became involved in the arts, and you know um how profit friendly the arts is in the Philippines. I'm trying to be sarcastic pero I'm failing. But
Yeah.
it's so I'm surrounded, or I was surrounded with a lot of starving artists, and like instead of us focusing on the arts, a lot of our focus was really how are we going to make the art sustainable for our community, or how are
Yes.
we able to survive as artists in the Philippines. And a lot of people in the film industry, for example, we work 30-hour shifts, and so there are a lot of people who end up resorting to chemical
Just
substances
to keep
just to
them
stay
awake, to keep them
just to
productive,
keep them
because
awake.
they need, yeah.
And then on the opposite side of the spectrum, you have people who have such mga psychological issues, neurodivergent people in the arts who are like hurting themselves because my family doesn't understand what I'm doing. Kailan
Yes.
ba ako magkakatotoong trabaho, blah blah blah. And what really helps
The
what
depression.
really helped with a lot of with a lot of the depression that I saw was weed. Like
Yes.
artists and weed. Like if we didn't have if we didn't have something to pull us away, to relax us despite all of the stress that you're getting all around, I don't know how artists would be able to survive. So I don't know.
Just the stressful
It
life of
needs
like
to
how you
be.
get by day as an artist, because it's really,
Yeah.
it's really hard.
Yeah.
I have so much gratitude for my privilege na
You're here,
for
you can
my
use weed here.
for the fact that I'm here during the pandemic in a
Pandemic.
legal country. I
And
can
pandemic
smoke
caused
every
a lot of
day.
stress.
I survived. Yes, I survived the pandemic because of that. Because seriously, I'm depressive and suicidal.
I
So
understand.
yeah.
But yes, it is hard. And, you know, thankfully the universe did bring you here in California, and we met, Ara, and we're working together too
I'm alive.
for a lot of projects. Yes.
So I also, okay, so something that they're discovering now for cannabis, right, is that how it affects our body is that we have something in our bodies called an endocannabinoid system, right? The endocannabinoid system helps with regulation of homeostasis and also reacts to different hormones, right? Some of those hormones are like anandamide. So anandamide, from the root word ananda, which means bliss. It is the bliss hormone. It's what makes us feel good, right? As well as like dopamine and serotonin. However, our bodies also stop producing those hormones when people go through extreme stress, traumas, and chronic pain, right? So like the you know, even, you know, I'm not a big religious person. However, you know, the scriptures do say, right, anything that God made from seed is for man, right? So
Yes.
like, this is not a synthetic substance. It is not something that was made in a laboratory, even though
Yeah.
there are some processing around it now.
Mm-hmm.
But it's
Yeah.
something natural that produces a chemical that our body needs when we're deficient, right? Because that's how nature
Mhm.
works, right? However, I want to also be clear that it's not for everybody. There's some people that should
Yeah,
not
that's true.
indulge. I have friends that get higher anxiety. I have friends that also have an
Mhm.
allergy towards the biomatter. You know? So, you know, like your body knows what you need, right? Like if you smell the
Mhm.
plant, you're like this is something that like you can
I
feel
can
your
take in something.
away from your ears,
Mhm.
right? You feel
It's
like a
in
nice
Mhm.
warm feeling in your stomach or
Yeah.
something. You know what I mean when you
Mhm.
interact. But like if it's something that like your body, you smell it and everything, your body rejects it, like, you know, listen to it. Like where, you know, I want to make sure as we talk about how do we create culture and laws and all these things around cannabis, like that it is done in a very mindful way where we're not kind of blanket statement anything, right? This is not for everybody. This is for
Absolutely.
people that really need it, and for people that really need it, and it's something that like resonates with them. It should be safe access.
This is the responsibility that we have. It's
Right.
you have to understand whether it's worth it.
Yeah,
And there's also some people who
and
actually
that's why.
respond to cannabis. Their body just
Yes.
does not, they
Mhm.
just don't respond. And I know cannabis is
Mhm.
processed in liver, so whether their liver is maybe not healthy or just, I think it's 20% of there's a percentage of
Mhm.
people just don't respond to cannabis. So there's also that.
Mhm.
But I also believe that
But that's also.
if done a proper research, especially medical research on this, right?
Yeah.
You know, it might not be for everybody when it comes to dosing, but you know, there's over 150 cannabinoids that we, if we extract each one of them,
Only one
it's
thing.
somewhere somehow, right? Somewhere somehow it might be for everybody, right? Why? Like you guys are saying, you know, it's just we are hardwired for cannabis. Well, you know, what do cannabis have? Cannabinoids, and what do we have? An endocannabinoid. Well, what are the chances of that, right? It's
And why
that's
was
by
there
design.
not in that
That is
book?
not absolutely, that is not, and that's not in any medical, you know, books. Why? Because that's we're
Oh,
not supposed to know that, right? But now the people are now smarting up, right? So don't, you know, there's probably a certain percentage of our population that mainly the generation Xers like me that needs to be having more convincing that give it a chance,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right? You know,
If it was
because
legal,
you know, because here's
if
how
it
the
was
way
legal, we could
exactly
really
and
push for studies in the
well
Philippines. We could push
you know
for
what,
literature in the Philippines.
forget that, we can, why not here in our own country at this
Yeah, the
point,
studies
because it's
are
still
already
Schedule 1, we can't
being
even
here.
do it,
Mhm.
right? You know, we do have limitation, but at this point
That's true.
I
I
have
just tell myself that Who cares what the books say? I go by peer-to-peer review,
Right, right.
right?
The one thing that I see that
Peer-to-peer
it makes it
reviews.
hard for the Philippines to even start research is because of how marijuana is classified. A Schedule One, really a Schedule One of a
Yes.
plant? I mean,
They
Schedule
need
E is
to reform that.
sometime later, but that needs to be changed, and that's that drug
Yeah.
reform we always talk about.
Cocaine is a Schedule 2
Yes.
drug, and like, which,
Properly, right?
right?
We there's
Yeah,
research everywhere. They can do their own
there's a
research, but
medicinal value. If you
until
actually categorize, sorry, if you actually categorize, what Schedule One is, because a
Mhm.
lot of people don't know that. It
Well,
means that it's a substance that's highly addicting and there's no medicinal value,
Mhm.
right? And yet, and here's the caveat of that: our own government
Mhm.
here has a patent for Marinol,
Mhm.
right? If no medicinal value, and yet our own government here are two-faced enough to say, "Hey, Marinol is my patent."
they claim to be
That's
right.
how it is. I think we all start here,
Mhm.
and then the rest was, once we get our federal legalization here, and I strongly believe that we can almost convince the whole world. You
so
know,
just to give some other backstory of like historical context
Mhm.
of like the criminalization of cannabis, right? Is you know there's a point in
Mhm.
time in American history and in world history where hemp was a demanded commodity
Hell
for
yes.
people to cultivate because
Mhm.
it helped to increase industrialization or industry, right? So like one, it was like ropes for
Mhm.
ships, sails, clothing, like all of those things,
And it
and
was also
also
used to clean soil for agriculture,
Yep.
for farming.
right.
soul booster.
Yeah.
And the
Incredible.
Philippines also were a huge producer um, of world like hemp, right? At a time period.
Yeah.
So like, and it was like General MacArthur that also had access to a lot of those farms because it helped to keep up the Navy, right? So um, during the time here in America where we saw um, Harry uh, Harry J. Anslinger, right? He was the drug czar, the first drug czar of America, right? When he came into power, right? There were a few other players on the outside that were working with him too.
Mhm.
Everybody having very racist perspectives, but there was William Randolph Hearst and DuPont. William Randolph Hearst had
Mhm.
he had
Mhm.
buy-in timber, right? And before paper was
Mhm.
made, either hemp or timber, right? And so in order to be able to keep his market share,
Mhm.
right, he
Get rid of
pushed
hemp.
to make um, hemp illegal. Then you also have DuPont, right? DuPont was competing against Ford. Henry Ford had a fully hemp car, right? So the body was made out of hemp resin. It worked on hemp biofuel, right? And also like the particle board in between, right, was made out of like hemp biomatter, right? But DuPont had crude oil and nylon was his business in paint, right? So DuPont, William Randolph Hearst, Anslinger, there was like a trifecta of like organizing with
Mhm.
those people to like, and they had a lot of resources to help to push
Mhm.
demonize the culture and be able to
Mhm.
corner segments of their industry, right? So this is multi-layered. We didn't
Mhm.
get here out of one perspective. It was a multi-layered fight. So
Mhm.
um, when we approach legalization, you have to think of it from like multiple different angles because it didn't become illegal just overnight, right? So when it
Yeah.
started becoming illegal over here, General MacArthur also pushed for it to be illegal over there, right? And then that's one of the factors, right, that criminalized and demonized and created this war on drugs in a global perspective of like the evil cannabis hemp plant. So we have to create new stories because we understand things in a new world, and we understand and we can see what the political strategy was, and then also the social power strategy to make darker people demons, right? And to make lighter people captains of industry, right? So like when we talk about legalization, we have to talk about uh, the sentiment of anti-darkness, right? You know, like what does that mean?
Discrimination.
Yeah, to like colorism. It's like people that work in fields are less than, but it's like, then how do you get your food? How do you get anything else? Is that not valuable? You know, it's so a lot of there's so many layers to this fight, and it is a fight, right? Because it's a fight for humans to be able to be humans and to work with the earth, right? And then to be able to make and to teach a very thoughtful culture, right? Or do we just assume everybody's stupid and are going to make stupid decisions, and so nobody could be trusted, and then that way we have to like criminalize people because that's how we control people's behavior, So I know that was a lot.
That's an interesting, yeah. That was an interesting
very
thing you
good,
said
actually.
about how, like, are people even prepared to handle it if once it's legalized? And somebody asked the question. See, this is what I want you guys to understand. In the Philippines, somebody asked the question, "What's the difference between nicotine and cannabis?" That's where we're at in terms of awareness. That's where the country is at in terms of awareness of cannabis. Absolutely nil.
It's not even close. It's like what you guys mentioned earlier, where they said
It's
where we said where marijuana is classified as the same, like it all has the same effect. You're gonna be a bad person. You're gonna kill somebody. And you're gonna
Rape
hurt
your
somebody. Yeah, you're
sister.
gonna be a rapist. You're gonna rape your
Yes.
sister and your cow. It's like all those drugs does the same exact thing all the time. And all of that whole transaction was you being an addict. Like it's just full of so much bad
Lies.
information,
Yeah.
lies, just
Stereotypes
the
and
stereotypes, the
Coming from
superstitions. Just
politicians in the Philippines.
this is what's hurting us, is that it's bad misinformation.
we need to change the narrative of what the media is portraying also, because that's what they're showing in the media, that's what the people are believing.
Yeah.
And if they just do research outside what they're programmed to believe, there is there are studies out there that can really prove how cannabis has been helping a lot of people with their illnesses. And not only that, how it's actually making a country economic standards rise, and
And also sugar is a drug, right? And
yeah,
there's causing
coffee.
diabetes
yeah,
and
coffee,
death, and
alcohol.
Because
There's way more
sometimes
deaths with sugar than marijuana, if I'm pretty correct on that. Is that a fact, guys? Is that a fact?
yeah, and sometimes that's their
Yeah.
argument, that cannabis can be abused, so they don't want it to get legalized in the Philippines. But they're
Yeah,
not seeing
that's
the
yeah.
bigger picture of, like what Nina said, sugar is a drug, coffee can be a drug, but anything can be abused. But with cannabis, like what we said, if you abuse it, you'll probably just end up having a good night's sleep, or
Exactly.
and learning from your experiences on how
Yeah.
to be eventually a responsible cannabis user. You know
You
your
know,
limits.
when people tell you that, hey, cannabis can be abused. All right, then, but so is Burger King. Do you go outside Burger King and say, hey, shut me down or shut this
abused.
down? That's actually because I can guarantee you, and that's why I know I sleep well
Yeah,
at night.
yeah.
None of my products
Guys,
will ever kill or harm anybody, right? But if you run an
someone on
operation of a
YouTube has a
liquor store,
question.
a 7-Eleven, right? That's at that point. If you're selling alcohol, if you're selling cigarettes, you're causing death. I'm
Yeah.
not, so
Yeah.
I know I will sleep at night.
Amazon's over here abusing the hell out of my credit card, man. I'm telling you,
There you go.
right? It's too much. When you have too much of anything, it's just bad. But you want to try? I mean, I'll be honest with you guys. I've tried abusing it, as in going all the way with marijuana, smoking it. I fell asleep. I couldn't. I just felt too good. I was like, "Oh, I'm going. I'm going. I gotta
Yeah,
stop
good night's
smoking."
sleep.
Yeah, and that was it. Like I woke
Somebody,
up.
I think somebody
Was
has a
fine.
question on YouTube.
Sure.
Yes.
Go ahead, Rex.
Some, oo.
Which one? Actually, I saw this one question also. It says from Judith, what's the difference of nicotine and cannabis?
Mm.
Oh, big.
Yeah.
Cool.
Go ahead.
Oh,
Ah.
go ahead. Do you have a?
Well, let's put it this way: nicotine actually has chemicals in there, right? It's actually synthetic. It's man-made. It has a lot of chemicals that's going to cause you, diseases and death. Cannabis in its natural form will never cause harm. Well,
If you're not
to a
allergic.
certain degree, absolutely right. There's a certain form, and that's why once again the educational part needs to be there and how to actually dose properly.
Mm.
Cigarettes at the end of the day will cost you a lot of problems, right? But
Yeah.
cannabis, cigarettes can actually cause
Yeah.
how's
It's a
this
different plant.
asthma or COPD, and people don't even know this as a secret that if you actually have that kind of disease, cannabis can actually expand your lungs and make you actually breathe more oxygen and it can actually help you out. It's just we have to educate everybody on what the difference is, and this is a perfect one, right? We're here in California, we're going to say what is that? But maybe around the world that's a common question where they think that cigarettes and cannabis are the same when it's not. One is natural and one is unnatural, where it can actually cause harm. Sorry.
Thank you for that, Ernesto. There's also one question here from Rex. Aside from Ara, anyone else know the subculture of weed in the Philippines?
And they're different plants,
Yeah, it would.
tobacco and cannabis.
So with Rex's question, yes, I also grew up in the Philippines. I just moved here 2010, so I also
Age unresponsive.
have I know the culture in the music and arts and the subculture
Mali.
as well. And we do have I do have friends na who got incarcerated. They got caught with weed, but they use it actually for medical purpose talaga. And some of them got jailed for years. Actually, one of the Medcan nominees, Jomi, he got jailed for 6 years, and now he's out to fight for medical cannabis legalization because he knows, like, even if he got jailed already, he knows what he's fighting for. He knows the bigger picture behind this. Of, let's say, people argue that, oh, because weed's gonna make you a lazy stoner. Like, yeah, sure, let's say you know two lazy stoners, but it's that character is relative on the person, you know what I mean? And compare that to what 2,000 seizure patients that this plant
Right.
can save. Can we
Right.
focus on them? I
Right.
mean,
Right.
that's what we really want to reiterate also, because with the guest speakers, I would also want to ask, like, what do you think can be done in the Philippines to balance the injustices that has been happening because of the current drug war that's been going on?
I think at the end of the day, they just need to look at the legal countries, legal states. Why all of a sudden Thailand's moving forward with this cannabis thing? Let's take a hint that it's not here in California. Just look at the studies. Since 1996, how many violence were there that cannabis tried to increase? You know, it's hard. It's hard for us to convince the politicians to believe what we have here, because two things too. We're going to fight corporations there. We're going to affect a lot and once again, I'm not going to go into that rabbit hole, but we're going to fight a lot of companies and corporations that's against cannabis. It's going to hurt them when it actually gets legalized.
Yeah.
But
Pharma, alcohol.
absolutely. And that's a big, pharma companies in the Philippines is big. There's a lot of, we make our own. We make it for the U.S. We make it for quite a few. We also have the tobacco companies, right? That we're gonna fight for, because that's gonna replace it. Alcohol companies all of a sudden will get affected. it's the injustice there. I'm really hoping that the next uh, presidential or all the presidential candidates are open enough to actually look at the truth. We can preach here for all we can, but it really will take not only that our people there to start educating everybody and just spreading the news. I tell everybody here and that I know from the Philippines. What's the difference of Ernest 10 years ago and the difference of Ernest now? I'm still the same. I'm not lazy. I'm actually more productive. Like I said, I can attest because I made, there was such a big difference in my life, to the point that hey, Filipinos, let's wake up. What is it that we're looking at right now that we're still prosecuting our own people over a plant, right? Is it? And I know it's all for politics and media. It's all for show. No different than here. It's no different than here. That's what we do here in the United States. We that's how we promote our government. Or we're gonna go ahead and bust this and go ahead and bust that. But all of a sudden, nothing's gonna happen. And I'm not gonna put any agency on spot, but it's everything else at the end of the day is would I look good in front of the camera?
But I would also
Right.
want to discuss with regards to the legalization. Like, Rex has a point that he wants to tell us
It's an
that,
interesting point.
yeah, it's an
Yeah.
interesting point. He
It's
said, do you
important.
guys
When we
consider that
started.
legalizing weed will kill the culture? And he also said, look at
Uh,
California. Legalizing it will not free the plant. It will kill it, corporate, private. If it gets legal, then they gotta be the same as bayabas, no laws at all. Like,
Bayabas.
totally free
And
the
that's
plant.
that's
Yeah.
exactly what I think.
Decriminalization as
Yes, that is
opposed to
actually the
legalization.
real
But
goal, to be
Yeah.
honest, like
That's
me
part of all.
personally.
This thing
but
should
but
be as cheap as a tomato at the end of the
Decriminalization.
day.
I'd like to know what
but
Nina
that
Parks can say
Yeah.
about this too.
Okay. So my involvement with cannabis legalization from the at least from 2015, and just realized I came in after 20 years of other people doing a lot of fighting already, right? So in that 20 years of people doing fighting, they fought
Mm.
for the veterans, they fought for people that had AIDS and cancer and all these other chronic illnesses to be able to use cannabis as like a way to heal, right? And then when I came in during the conversation about legalization, and I want to be very, 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 very clear that I did not vote for legalization in California. I want to be very clear because I actually put a lot of time and effort into being able to, make an argument for the language not being the language that was equitable and or good for the culture, or actually good for small business. Like, it was a corporate takeover of weed, hands down. We're still fighting over it right now. I helped to create
Yeah.
something. I helped with like at least 100 other advocates, right, to help to create a
Yeah.
cannabis programs here in California, which was what they call our Hail Mary pass to try to preserve culture and to preserve small business, as well as a culture, building in a culture around bigger businesses helping disadvantaged folks, because of the drug war, there was a segment of people that were created to be less
Mm.
human than other people, right? So with the equity programs, because we required investment into people that had been harmed by the war on drugs, it was a means of being, it's not the answer, but again, like I said, it was a Hail Mary pass after legalization to help to try to build in this culture of healing people that have been harmed by past laws, right? So Rex is completely correct. Right now, we're seeing a huge extinction event of small farmers because the bigger farms have pushed down the price of cannabis so much, and then the state is increasing the cultivation tax, right? So where's the amount of money that the state is taking just for pushing around paperwork is the amount of money that a person would get for trimming cannabis, right? For 1 pound of cannabis. Like the government is taking
Yeah.
that away from other people because they want to increase this tax. And just to be very clear, that's not the only tax. We have an excise tax at 15%. We
Yeah.
have a sales tax at
Yeah.
8.9%, and then we also have
Mhm.
like potential other city taxes, like
About
Oakland
40%.
5%, and like altogether it's about 43%, right? And with the increase, it's going to be close to 50%. So you know what I mean?
Mhm.
So like
Why isn't that
again,
applied in other industries, right? Why just us?
Mhm.
and
With
it's
a cash
because
Still
cow,
a
this
yeah.
way to control.
This is
Yes.
this
it's
is
this
So
is
why
a
it's
basically, there's
very
like there are pros and cons to it. But
absolute.
at least with the pros, like what Nina was saying, like the equity programs really help balance out the injustice that happened prior to
That's
the
yeah.
legalization. Correct.
Mm-mm.
Yes.
There's that, and
Yeah.
it's also very important
Mhm.
that we go into the regulations,
Yes.
not just
Yeah.
how one country's done it or one state's done it, but as far as Philippines doing this,
Yeah.
they gotta really
And
look into it.
by the way,
That's a
speaking of
question.
the regulations and for the Philippines, we do have Attorney Henry, the chairperson for Medical Cannabis Party, who can, of
Mhm.
course, introduce the party and share the objectives of the medical cannabis. All right. Okay. Hi, Attorney
Hey,
Is he
Henry.
here?
hello po.
Oh my
Yeah.
God!
Hi,
Hi.
everyone. I
Hi.
Welcome,
hope you can
welcome,
hear
welcome. I love
me
your
Welcome to
background. I love
clearly.
your
you.
background.
And thank you, Rex, for your
I've
questions
I've
earlier.
been listening from the very start to your discussion, so I'm glad and happy that you're all here. Hi, Ernest, Nina, Miss Pia, and of course
Oh.
I've met Ara, and Kuya Ed, and Julie.
Yes.
Hello
Thank
po.
you. Salamat, maraming salamat po. I think I'm speaking on behalf of the patients and advocates back here in the Philippines.
Mhm.
Thank you. No, I've always discussed and shared this with Filipino advocates based abroad, especially those who are in a regulated country. You have a major and important role back home here for the legalization movement. Um, you are the one who are providing the information, the necessary insights, the hands-on experiences that we don't have here in the Philippines. No, our detractors, those who are really against marijuana or cannabis regulation or legalization in the Philippines, they continue to spread lies. They continue to demonize the plant. And what you are doing right now with
Yeah.
just doing this webinar, sharing your personal stories, you are basically telling us, lahat ng mga Filipino rito sa Pilipinas, it's okay. Marijuana is okay. Cannabis will help us,
Yeah.
individual and as a country. And again, thank you. That's
Mhm.
one of the important role that you are currently doing. So one point that I note with your discussion is whether you were born and raised in the Philippines or in the US, for example, we were all taught that marijuana is wrong. It is bad. And it's basically the same prohibition that we experience. Nina discussed very briefly discussed the relationship of the U.S. laws and how it was imported here in the Philippines, and now, of course, when on the Nixon term, no, the concept of drug war, it was also imported here in the Philippines. No, it was the same time that it was implemented here in the Philippines, and but it's also um, absurd or ironic that the same country where these laws came from or originated are already relaxing their laws, but here we are currently still experiencing the brunt and the violence of the most, I think, bloodied or form of drug war, with counting to 40,000 people killed
Oh my
in the
God.
government's drug war. That is one too many. And again,
Yeah.
it's a challenge to even to discuss with some cannabis advocate that it is the same law that we are currently under, whether what drug it is involved. Marijuana is still illegal. We have the same penalty being imposed to us, and still the
Mm.
Philippines is one of the harshest country to be caught with marijuana. A single joint can
Yeah.
land you a minimum of 12 years in the Philippines. A single plant is life
Yeah.
imprisonment or death penalty back here in the Philippines.
Yeah.
So this is one of the major challenges that we are currently trying to change. No, the cannabis movement has already been lobbying for a decade already, and our collective frustrations really have pushed us to fight on all fronts. And now we know how dirty the politics is. It's the last
Mm.
form of participation that we really want to be involved here in the Philippines. But we've come to a point that it's really the
Yeah.
high time to have a representative in Congress and directly participate to in the election for next year, and have a political party that will basically push for the access of medical cannabis. That is the main and urgent demand currently: safe and
Mhm.
affordable access. It is a fact that the rich and powerful can access medical cannabis. We have a former president of the country that is
Mhm.
openly speaking that it's marijuana that helps her. We have senior politicians that are
Yeah.
traveling, that can travel, that can access to other countries that are regulated. So
Mm.
why can't we allow
Yeah.
our majority of
Ordinary
our
citizens.
exactly
Yeah.
ordinary citizens who can't you
Mhm.
can't travel or don't have the funds to access in a
Mhm.
regulated country? So that's the main and urgent demand that we are
Mhm.
trying to push. And another thing, whenever I'm asked if the country is really ready to have a regulated environment, I always answer in the affirmative. I always believe that majority of Filipinos have at least know about marijuana, whether it's bad or wrong. But we have to look at on how our indigenous peoples and our farmers up north. It's like an ordinary
Mm.
plant up north in the Philippines. So they can prove the
Yeah.
historical context on how we are really related to the plant. No, until now, I mean, we can meet
Mhm.
all the relatives or lolas who can share na during their time, whenever they have just this masakit ang tiyan, papakulo lang ng ganitong dahon,
Yeah.
we have a family member. There's always one family member that
We have that
that are
push.
educated and or have at least experienced it. So
Yeah.
it's really important to push this. And we consider the election in the Philippines as the biggest stage, whether you
Mhm.
see it as an entertainment stage or not. But it is the biggest stage. The spotlight, the highlight is in the election. So what we are doing right now, the
Mhm.
medical cannabis party, we participated, might as well have at least a few minutes of that limelight. It's the access to medical cannabis is an important issue, and we want it to be a major electoral
Mhm.
issue in 2022. So
Yeah.
again, thank you
Yeah.
to all of you for doing this today, and I really look forward to collaborate and work with all of you. I think Julie can quickly share
Yes.
our legislative agenda. It's very quick.
Yes.
I think a lot of questions can be answered by our legislative agenda. We believe that we will never have
Bayabas
a,
for life.
a good regulatory environment if we will not push or at least change the laws to
Yes.
have this um, in place. So again, first and foremost, the Medical Cannabis Party is the first political party in the Philippines, a single issue in the whole of Asia. That's pushing for the access to medical cannabis. Our first and foremost, our agenda really is to provide for an affordable and safe access to medical cannabis for patients. That is the urgent demand. Currently, it's a fact that there are a lot of patients right now that are using marijuana. If only there are no fear of reprisal, hindi lang kami huhulihin. A lot of Filipinos here in the Philippines will speak out how marijuana helps them, how cannabis aid them on their illnesses.
Yes.
Second is to establish a well-regulated and thriving local industries of cannabis and hemp. We believe that it should be a long-term and sustainable reform in our law, that the government will support our small farmers, small and medium-scale enterprises. It can be a cooperatives. It's a new product for cooperatives. It basically the equity to access to it. I have this personal opinion that in a matter of 5 to 6 years, it will be allowed in the Philippines. But to who will benefit on it? It can be a big cannabis company. Cannabis is now a big business in other countries, so they have the power or influence to change the law. So it's really important that the government or our drug laws will be changed. To accommodate the ordinary people, the interests of small farmers. So that's second point that we will push. Number three, include medical cannabis in the curriculum. A lot of doctors don't know because it is not taught in our med schools here in the Philippines. Our cannabis doctors, they always share that it was never taught. If it's mentioned, it's categorized in the negative. It's really a bad substance. So it should be included in our curriculum. Next is to eventually enact regulations to allow for limited cultivation. We're an agricultural country. We have a lot of people been saying that we have the perfect climate or weather and the soil to have this industry. You know, our indigenous peoples and farmers have been cultivating it, and so allow them. It's about time to allow them legally to cultivate it again. Of course, next is to decriminalize the possession of small amounts of cannabis. Again, we're one of the we have one of the harshest laws in the world in cannabis. A few years back, we have a client who his boss, I think somewhere in Europe, sent CBD oil. He was arrested. It's CBD oil for her mother who has cancer, but he was arrested, and that's life imprisonment. So that's what's happening here. Whether a small amount or for medical purpose, it's still illegal. So we have to decriminalize. It's absurd to have an access to medical cannabis, but we're still jailing people. So we have to change that. Of course, expunge past convictions and criminal records. Here in the Philippines, we have the plea bargaining in drug cases. So a lot of clients that I have, they were illegally arrested, set up. Their homes were just raided by the police and then just arrested. And just to be freed, they will agree that they commit a crime or a lesser offense. So a lot of convicted or those with criminal records in the Philippines on marijuana, it has to be removed. Second, next, of course, is to influence adoption of human rights, harm reduction. It's really needed. A lot of policies in the country should be amended or reformed, following the principles of human rights and harm reduction. And lastly, I think it's one of the topic that Nina Mark has been discussing, is to ensure that the profit from hemp and cannabis industries will benefit and reinvested on patients, former victims of drug war. We have here in the Philippines, it's a small government office where you can file for reparation if you're incarcerated wrongly for years. So we want cannabis and marijuana convictions to be included in that, to have some kind of an equity fund. Yeah. So that's the main legislative agenda of the Medical Cannabis Party, and we are really looking forward to have it to make it a major political issue in 2022. So again, thank you everyone for sharing your stories, and you're doing you're helping us in a great way back here in the Philippines.
And thank you, Kuya Henry, for doing all that you guys do. You guys are always on the move there, especially with things getting on the elections. I'm sure you guys are very, very busy. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us.
Yes, and thank you also for creating objectives that are very sensible. It really makes sense na you're also connecting it to human rights, because that's very important also, especially with the incarcerations that's been happening. And also, um, like what we said, we have pros and cons, and also with the safety concerns. I remember before when it was still like legal here, just medical and not recreational, we used to have this source. And one time he met us, duguan siya, he was bloodied and all that, because he was saying that, someone was trying to steal his stuff and all that. But my point really is, uh the legalization with the right regulations can really ensure safety. And not only that, we are here to really push forward to freeing the plant. Yun talaga yung parang ultimate goal in the future,
Mm.
'di ba? That we actually make it to the point that tomatoes and weed, they have the same price somehow,
It's
right? So,
Yeah.
but
Now imagine being able to grow your medicine in your own
yeah,
backyard in
Yeah.
the Philippines
with
and
without
without it
feeling
being an issue.
alarmed. Yes.
Pero
I mean, this grows
yeah. But
naturally,
what's
so
really interesting for me, what's interesting for me as somebody who's lived that fear is the idea of equity na what,
Yes.
because I've had a friend who was in jail for a pouch 4 grams of weed in his breast pocket because he grew up in San Francisco. So when he was in the Philippines, he didn't think it was anything. He didn't think it was a big deal. So he had this, and at the airport. So that was also kind of, he was in prison for a year, and his family was choked for bribes. Na you need to come up with a certain amount just for him to ano. And he wrote us this because he's a poet, and he wrote this beautiful letter while he was in jail about the suffering of the people there. And then there's his inmates, they'd be watching this show about how people would be caught, and it's like, oh, it's broad. And then much later the guy would show up, like it's their introduction to their new inmate, and he'd be like, oh, we just watched the worst day of your life happen. So I am interested in the idea of what happens to them, like people who've had records, or people who are still in jail. Like if we have legalization, if we have decriminalization, what kind of reparations are we asking from the government for people like that? Do they have the opportunity to become industry leaders?
Yeah. So in San Francisco, those are, first off, that is a crazy story about your friend, like having, of course, it's a cultural difference, right? Because like in one culture where he grew up in, not a big thing, right?
Yeah.
Going somewhere else is the
Yeah.
culture shock. So as much as we regulate and create laws around things, more important than anything is the culture that we build around it, because the culture and like will always help to guide behaviors and help to build like healthy environments is through culture, right? In the way that we move.
Mm-hmm.
So that being said, though, like the culture that we're trying to create with the cannabis equity programs in California, right, is a culture of reinvestment, right? So if people were divested in, right, because they had a felony record and so couldn't get a job, couldn't qualify for a home, couldn't qualify for an apartment,
Yeah.
couldn't qualify, no longer could get a student loan or a student grant. So higher education became more difficult to attain, and then you push them into a corner of not having access to opportunity, right? And then they become more criminal,
And
right?
BI hits.
Where
Yeah.
do they go, right? It's this ugly cycle. So the idea would be to, with our equity programs, is that if you have a conviction, you have an opportunity to attain some education, right? Like around how to navigate the system, how to, like how to get supported in starting a successful business, right? And manageable business, right? And then being able to be at front of the line for a license. So it's very interesting because what I actually saw when we were working on the equity programs, I was in the Philippines because my Lola was passing away. She was transitioning. So when we
I'm sorry.
thank you. She had a very long life and many kids and many grandkids. And she was not lacking for sure. She lived a very, very healthy life. So and a very impactful life. So but what I was able to see out in Angeles City, right, was that if foreigners wanted to come in and do business in Angeles City, they had to pair with somebody that was local, right? They couldn't get the opportunity unless there was someone from the Philippines, right? Like also going to benefit from the business, right? So that concept, is something that we also utilized in our equity program. Is that okay? Well, if you're a business, because our equity applicants get the first movers advantage, right? Then you have to invest in our people, right? You have to invest in people that have been harmed. You have to invest in healing because that's the culture of this plant. This plant is healing. The culture of building, like our industry should be healing too, right? So that's why we fight hard against the harms, because that's not what the culture of this plant is. This culture of the plant is to chill out. It's to chill out. Like when you see like the aggravation of like big business and all these other things, like it's the responsibility of people that are legalizing the plant, right, to push the chill culture, because it's like do no harm. That's not what we're here for. We're here to help us gain balance again, So just 2 cents.
What I like about it is like an example that Ate Pia gave earlier when she said that when she's out in venues, she goes out and people will complain, and then she'll go out and give samples, and then they'll leave. But you never really expect anything, but they come back to buy more, or they become
it's effective.
because it works.
It
And then
sells itself.
the vibes just keep passing on, and then they'll recommend it.
And like what Ernesto shared earlier too, with regards to how he approaches it to people who are very new to cannabis, his first approach would be topical to make them experience the pain cream.
Get them comfortable first.
Yes, get them comfortable first, and then they become a believer because it really works for them, and it does work. It is a very, very good pain cream. And aside from that, there are other usage, like for tinctures. There are for tinctures and gummies. It's you can also smoke it. So it really depends on what would work for your body as well.
It works.
And also,
I guess
my hemp chinelas work.
One of the things.
Legally, also,
one of the
the
things
law will
people-
change if we consider it as a medicine first.
Yes.
Allow it as a medicine.
Right.
That's our basic
Give
argument
patients the
with the
access,
government
yes.
agencies. Give us access. Allow research. Allow hospitals to have access to it. Experiment on it. I mean, that's one
my
of the first argument that we were saying. We need to reform the law to allow it as a medicine.
But we have to
after
remember, guys, there's a big one too, and this is my fight. This is my 2 cents in it. there's not going to be any research going to happen if nobody knows how to grow marijuana. If the knowledge isn't
Yeah.
introduced, if the knowledge is constantly blocked from social media or constantly
Not,
reported because it's a
yeah.
criminal offense or it's a drug thing, whatever they all the other things that
Yeah.
they use
Or
as
at least if if the already existing farmers aren't allowed to, to just live their
Grow
lives, because
openly.
at the end
to
of the day
grow
they're
open.
the ones, yeah, they're the ones who are the most abused of this entire situation. Like, we're lucky, a lot of people are very, very lucky to have access, but there's an inordinate amount of people who do not have access, to information, who are still locked in this, in conservative mindsets. And unfortunately, it's these people. But I wanted to scream when I read this article about how Jesus, the oil that he uses pala is hemp based. I'm like, oh, si Jesus. My Catholic family members, I wanted to yell at them now. Oh my God, si Jesus nyo kumakain ng
This is
marijuana.
anointing oil. Yeah, it's cannabis.
Anointing oil niya. Yeah.
Yes.
Can I share with you guys that? Okay, so right now I'm actually not in San Francisco. I'm in New York.
The
New York,
Rocky show.
Oh, oh
Yeah.
my God.
cousin Rocky Rivera.
It's early morning.
Yes.
It's too
Um,
exciting.
This is the second time I've been back since.
Yeah.
So my brother was arrested in New York, right, for cannabis. He got charged and
Yeah.
sentenced to a year at Rikers Island. And then a few months later, my father was arrested in New York also. My cousin Rocky Rivera was also arrested in New York, and for just smoking a joint on a stoop. And I want to just say that I came because like they just recently legalized, right, in
Yes,
in
New York. Yes.
and I had bought some weed in a store,
Yeah.
right, out here, like, and I got some salve in the store, and it has THC and CBD in it, right, which is a very, very long
Buo.
way from where we were only 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Your
it
safety is now
Yeah.
insured, Nina. Yes.
it's a huge, huge difference.
It's possible.
Yes.
It's so possible. Like, see, I'm reading Rex's comment na, oh, PH is near the equator. I don't underestimate Filipino growers for agro as well. There are farms, there are strains that are Filipino, that are local in the Philippines, and those farmers, parang imagine, we have farmers for sure, but because it's illegal, it's hard for them to grow
For
quality
to come
stuff.
out as cannabis
Openly.
farmers.
Yeah.
Yeah,
If
openly.
it was
Yeah.
decriminalized or
Uh,
legal. Yeah,
Imagine
we
in the
can develop
streets.
our own strains, like tropical, ano, diba?
I agree. Just jumping with what Ara just said. In the street level, the local strains. We have local strains, of course. I've been telling this to to the government. Anywhere in the Philippines, in the street, you can. There's a guy who will tell you where to get marijuana. So it's really here. I mean, that's one thing. Ano, so ang like kong sinasabi sa
Part
it's
of
really
the
important
culture
is the
already.
regulation. How to regulate it. We should properly put it in the right category. We reform our laws. If we have, alcohol and nicotine, for example, in the Philippines, should be highly regulated substances. Under the law, hindi dapat siya
Yeah.
natitingi. You can't buy per stick. So in the Philippines, you can buy per stick, right? It's not allowed under our law. All stores who sell alcohol, for
Really?
example, should have a special permit. But our sari-sari stores, of course, a lot of them, they don't comply. Pero we don't jail them. We don't jail the
Yeah.
minors who are smoking cigarettes. We don't jail the
Yeah.
sari-sari store
Yeah.
who sell one red horse because he doesn't
Who
have
sells?
a permit. So that's one of the logic that I'm trying to explain to this government official. It's just a matter of a regulation. Imagine if we consider it as a medicine, the dosage, the importance of where does the raw materials came from. That's very important factor. So we can't have that in place if we still have this laws in the country. So I agree with a lot of the people have been telling that we need to change our laws first to have this. I mean, a lot of things that we really want to do in the Philippines. So
Mhm.
it's really a challenge. And we are calling
Yeah.
the support of a lot of Filipinos. It's about time. If you believe it's a medicine, if you
Yeah.
believe that no one should be jailed for a plant, please join us.
Mhm.
Please join the advocacy. It's about time
Yes.
to
Mhm.
change our laws.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much, Sir Henry. And again, that's Attorney Henry. He's the first nominee for the medical cannabis party list. And thank you so
The
much. And
first and the
Mhm.
only
yes,
in Asia.
and the medical cannabis party list is the first, yes, a political party that is pushing for medical cannabis in the whole Asia, and it's in the Philippines. Thank you.
We're the craziest bunch.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
A lot of people
Cancel the
are telling us
legalization.
you're crazy. You combine politics and marijuana. You're the crazy. And hey, we believe that we'll take it. If we're the craziest bunch, we believe that um, amen. We're saving lives. We're saving
Yes,
lives. So
fighting for a good cause.
Mhm.
Every
thank
day.
you.
All right, thank you. And again,
Attorney,
thank you sa lahat.
you're gonna have a chatmate na daw.
Yes, sabi ni Rex, i-message ka niya. Yes, thank you Rex for participating. Thank you so much.
Go Rex,
Thank
Yes.
you
message
to
nila
the
na.
others as
Yeah,
well.
that was cool. Oo.
Yes.
Interactive, di ba?
Yes. And sana nag-enjoy kayo. We're gonna wrap up the show already, our webinar. But who knows, we might make another one in the near future again with our guest speakers. And by the way, I also would like to inform you guys that on December 10, that is Human Rights Day here in California, we will also go live because we'll have a special guest. If you guys know the Mike Weiss show, he has a Facebook account. His name is Mike Wise. He is the CEO of OG Labs, OG Labs Genetics, sorry, in Europe. And he is also an athlete, a filmmaker, and he also is a cannabis patient because he used it for Crohn's disease, which he had. And he also had an interview with Rick Simpson's, the famous Rick Simpson's oil. So, yes, it would be so exciting to hear from Mike Wise, his story, because he also got incarcerated at some point. And yeah, December 10, California, that will be 10 p.m. And that's going to be in the Philippines, Saturday, December 11 at 2 p.m. It will be hosted by Miguel De Leon. So that's our next event. And on December, I believe that's 17, California, also Friday, and that Saturday in the Philippines, the 18th, we will have another webinar which will focus on the Filipino artists in support of medical cannabis legalization for the Philippines as well. We will have Bowie. The basis for Parokya ni Edgar will be there. We will have Nivera, a musician here in California, also a musician there in the Philippines before. So he's a multi-talented overall musician. And we also have Calrats. Calrats is a band in Los Angeles, and all the members in that band works in the legal cannabis industry. So they'll be sharing their experiences and how working in the legal cannabis industry is also helping them thrive.
You've got a good
And
lineup. You've got a
yes,
really good lineup.
and we will also have Ree Bergado, Nina Parks. I don't know if you've met her, but she was there in Pinayista. Ree Bergado is actually from LA. She, or yeah, her, she is a filmmaker, and also she does some VMAs where her clients are like Gwen Stefani, Snoop Dogg. So it would be interesting to hear her parts also. And I think we also have Mike Swift. So Mike Swift, rapper from the Philippines, who is now here in California. So he'll also be sharing his parts on how cannabis is helping him here and why he's fighting for medical cannabis legalization as well for the Philippines. So thank you so much again for all the guest speakers. Thank you, Nina Parks,
Thank you,
Pia
everybody.
Barton,
You guys. Kuya
Ernesto,
Henry. Oh, pasa na.
Ara, thank you. Yes, thank you, Attorney, and thank you, Kuya Ed. Yes.
Give it.
Yeah.
Ang kulit.
And I hope you guys learned a lot from this webinar. Ang daming na share. Thank you everyone for sharing your stories. Very inspiring
Thank
and
you,
very
everybody.
knowledgeable. Yes.
But
All right. Good night and
Good night,
good
everybody.
afternoon,
Thanks
Philippines.
for
Good
having me. Uy,
afternoon,
watch
Yes.
Pilipinas.
Super Psycho Cebu on Vimeo.
Yes. Super Cycle Cebu. All right. And thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.